What's going on, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Baumbastic Podcast, hosted by Andrew Ellis, yours truly. And we are part of Inside Arkansas, and I appreciate all of you guys being here today. I just got done wrapping up a quick little live stream with my boy John Neighbors. We had to recap Arkansas football linebacker Brad Spence entering the transfer portal, another kind of annoying thing to have to do. So forgive me if my vibes are a little bit off. I was seconds away from hitting record to do this very episode talking about Arkansas baseball here on the Baumbastic Podcast, which, as you guys know, my favorite thing to do. I enjoy it a lot more than talking Arkansas portal exits for sure in football. But yeah, I was literally right about to hit record when I got the text that Spence was entering the portal, so we had to scramble and put out some content. So go check that out if you have not, or after this. This is much more important. But also, appreciate all you guys for being here. You know, I love to talk Arkansas baseball, and I appreciate the real ones. If you're consuming Arkansas baseball content, what is it, December 11th? If you're consuming Arkansas baseball content, that means you're really tapped in. You're a real diehard. You're a real ball knower, I would even go as far as to say. So I appreciate all of you guys tapping in and enjoying the content. Really appreciated the reception of people being excited that it was back. That really made my heart soar and really fed the ego a little bit. But also, if you're not subscribed already to our Inside Arkansas YouTube channel, do that now. If you're watching on YouTube, it should be easy. Little tabs right there below the subscribe button. Hit that notification bell as well so you'll get updates and notifications when we go live, when we do some of our stuff, and when we're producing our content, as well as our podcast platforms, by the way. If you're listening to this on a podcast platform, I appreciate you for doing that. But Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, Amazon, there's a few other random podcast apps. We're on all of them, or at least we should be, according to Megaphone. So make sure you're tapped in, and you're consuming this content whichever way it is. I know some people like to watch, some people like to listen, some people don't like to look at my face. I get all that. But we appreciate you for consuming this content and being a part of what we're doing here, no matter what. So I appreciate all that. And I also appreciate you guys for responding whenever I issued the call for, hey, I need you guys to throw me some questions, throw me some bones, let me know what you want to hear me talk about. Because again, that's what we're here to do, to talk ball. I wanted to feel like you guys are actually a part of the show, because you are. I mean, you very much are. And I appreciate that again. So today we will be tapping into a question which I really appreciated from our guy Lane here. He says, last year, Hogs hit 87 home runs as a team, the lowest total since the 2017 season, which, by the way, was the final season that Tony Vitello was the hitting coach at Arkansas. That's actually pretty funny that season was referenced. But will we see more home runs this year, or will the outcome be the same as last year? Keep doing what you're doing, Andrew. Love that. Baumbastic is back. Well, I appreciate the kind words, Lane, and I also appreciate the question. This is something that I've kind of been wanting to talk about for a while, and we've spoken a little bit about it. And the short answer to the question is yes, Arkansas should have, or should at least be in a position to have an uptick in power, see some more slugging, see some more home runs. But before I talk about that in depth, and I'm going to go through the roster and kind of what my expectations are for the lineup and how realistic it is that there really is more home runs for this team. But before we do that, I kind of want to just have an overarching conversation about this topic, because I hear it discussed a lot when I'm either at the games or just talking to fans or whatever it is, or just on the internet. You hear a lot of Arkansas is home run or bust. They rely too much on the long ball, and it's Nate Thompson's fault. He's got all these guys beefed up trying to hit home runs. They don't care about hitting singles and all that. And look, guys, to an extent, I get that. I especially get that when, you know, a situation arises like a runner on third and one out and a guy strikes out, and I could get being frustrated. I mean, you should be frustrated in that situation. I would just push back against the idea that it was because they were trying to hit a home run, because it's really, there's a little bit more nuance to these things. Like sometimes you just in a 2-2 count and a guy whips off a nasty slider and you strike out. In fact, one of the biggest at-bats of the season last year was a situation where I believe it was Peyton Stovall at the plate with a runner on third, less than 2 outs, kind of get that run in. And the pitcher just throws a nasty pitch and he swings at a pitch in the dirt, strike three. Is it because Peyton Stovall is not a great hitter? No, he's a great hitter. We know that. Is it because he was trying to hit a home run? No, I can assure you he was not trying to hit a home run. It's just one of those things. And so sometimes we see the results on the field and we see that it's not what we want it to be, and we try and kind of make it about something bigger, or we try to take it and view it through the wrong lens. And look, I get all that to an extent. And frankly, guys, let me just be clear. I think you should be frustrated with Arkansas's offense and the way that it's trended the last few years. This is something that on the show last year we talked about a lot, because Arkansas, let's just be honest, underachieved offensively. And frankly, the last few years, there's been some negative trends with Arkansas baseball and kind of the offense in particular. And but again, I do want to just push back against the notion, one, that Arkansas is trying to hit home runs a ton, which again, they have a power based approach. And I would just say, if you look around the country and all the teams that are scoring the most runs in the country, the teams that are going to Omaha year in and year out, the teams that are in the mix to win the national championship, a lot of them have that power in common. Like, it's usually, if you look at the top teams in home runs in the country, it's usually a lot of the best teams in terms of winning, in terms of runs scored, in terms of having a chance to compete for the national championship. I mean, look no further than the national title series last year between Tennessee and A&M. Those two lineups had a ton of power. And look, is Arkansas going to be able to hit that many home runs? I don't know. I mean, hell, those two teams are going to struggle to replicate that power. But my point is, I would just push back on the idea that Arkansas having a power-based approach is why Arkansas is not having success. And frankly, if you look at the numbers last year and the year before, I would even argue if Arkansas were hitting more home runs, they would be in shape. Because if you're going to rely on home runs, which again, I'm hesitant to accept that as like a real thing. But if you're going to rely on home runs, you damn sure got to hit them. So at Tulane's point, like, if Arkansas is going to have their lowest, if they're going to have 87 home runs again, which, by the way, a decade ago, that would have been like a very respectable number. I remember when, like, I think it was like 98 or something like that was the school record not that long ago. But times have changed a little bit. There's been an uptick in home run, uptick in powers. They've changed the balls, changed the bats a little bit. So you're seeing more and more teams have these big donkeys that are hitting 25, 30 home runs. And Arkansas's got a few on their team that they might have this year. But if you just look at it, I would actually argue that if Arkansas were hitting more home runs, they would be in a lot better shape. Again, because power is a big part of what they do. Slugging is a big part of what they do. And frankly, I've always kind of said this, though. When you're in the SEC and you're facing high-level arms like a Hagen Smith, like a Gabe Gackle, like a Paul Skeens, or whatever, which one is more realistic, to have a walk and a 2-run home run in an inning, or to rattle off 4 hits and get those 4 base hits to score those 2 runs? It's a lot easier to get hit by a pitch or get walked, or maybe you reach on an error or whatever. Maybe you even beat out an infield single or something like that, and then you hit a double that scores a run, or you hit a home run that scores 2 runs. Obviously, that's a very like simplistic way to view it. But I'm just pointing out the numbers kind of back it up. I would actually equate it a little bit to the 3-point shot in basketball, where people have kind of pushed back for a while now at how dependent modern offenses are in basketball with the 3-point shot. But if you look at the numbers, there's a reason, because the numbers back it up. You need to be able to knock down threes to win in basketball. It's just kind of the way we're at in this world. And do you have to have other things? Do you have to be able to drive to the rim? Absolutely. And it's the same thing in baseball. You can't literally have all your hits be home runs. You got to do some other things. And look, Arkansas's lineup, which again, we will tap into in a little bit here in a second, they have some guys, they have some different skill sets. And that's something that Dave Van Horn talked about in his post-game press conference after the season ended. Is he wants to see a little bit higher level athlete. He wants to see some more versatility. He wants to have well-rounded players on his roster. And I feel like Arkansas went out and did that with the lineup that they put together in the portal this offseason. And so, look, Arkansas is going to hopefully not be as quote unquote dependent on the home run ball. But I also do think there's going to be an uptick in power. And again, we will tap into the lineup here in a second. But before we do that, I did just want to show some numbers here over the last, handful of years here. So let's go back for those that are listening on podcasts and do not see, I have a graphic up here on YouTube. But I'm going to go all the way back to the 2018 season, which again was Nate Thompson's first year as Arkansas's hitting coach. And also, in my mind, the best team in school history, the team that is kind of the standard, the team that should have won the national title, was 1 out away from doing it. They were 6th nationally in home runs per game, 3rd in the SEC, and they were 13th nationally in slugging. Once again, this team damn near won the national title. You look at the A&Ms, the LSUs, the Texases, or Tennessees of the world, 6th nationally, 13th nationally, and slugging home runs. That's kind of where you want to be. That's where those teams are. In 2019, the next year, which Arkansas got right back to Omaha, they went 2-2. But that team actually had a higher batting average, scored more runs per game. Again, 16th nationally in home runs per game, which was 3rd in the SEC, and they were 10th nationally in slugging, which is 2nd in the SEC. And then even 2021. Now, this offense was a little bit different because their batting average was substantially lower than those 2018 and 2019 teams, but they led the country in walks, or at least they did for a while. I don't know if they finished the top of the country in walks, but they were way up there in walks. And they were fourth nationally in home runs per game. That actually led the SEC, and they were 17th nationally in slugging. And again, those three teams, 2018, 2019, 2021, were three of the best teams in school history. I mean, that 2021 team had Kevin Kopps. They had a lot of other things that made them good, and they ended up falling short in the super regionals, but they won 50 games. Like, that was one of the best teams in school history. And again, I'm now also at the top of this list here. Again, for those that are not watching on YouTube, last year, Arkansas was 69th nationally, ninth in the SEC in home runs per game, 130th nationally in slugging, 11th in the SEC. That, my friends, is not sustainable. Obviously, you don't need me to explain to you why being at the top nationally is good, being middle of the pack nationally and bottom of the SEC is bad. But again, it just comes back to what Arkansas's approach is and kind of what they're trying to do. You kind of have to hit home runs. And I would argue that if Arkansas had a little bit more power in this lineup, their season might not have ended. I mean, the game that kind of ended their season, not the SEMO game, which was a disaster, but that Kansas State game, which is really the backbreaker, they gave up 4 home runs. And I think they might have actually hit one, Arkansas themselves. But they ran into a team that had the big swings in that game. They hit home runs against Hagen Smith. They had a huge 3-run home run that broke the game open. Having power is pretty much a cheat code to having success offensively, and it can kind of cover a multitude of woes. And you just see a lot of games in the SEC, especially on those Friday, Saturday nights, that are low scoring, that are 5-2, stuff like that. Having big donkeys that can slug it, that can hit those 2-run doubles, those 3-run home runs and stuff like that, it is the easiest way to get the most out of your offense. Again, do you need to occasionally steal a base? Sure. Do you have to go the other way and just take a base hit when it's offered to you? 100%. You have to be able to do all these things. You have to take your walks. But I do think that the power has been missing here from Arkansas the last few years. The last few years, Arkansas's batting average has been lower than it's been in those years I detailed earlier, 2018 and 2019, and the power has been dipping as well. Arkansas still draws a pretty fair amount of walks, but offensively, there's been a little bit of a dip here in the last few years. And Arkansas's pitching staff has been so dominant, especially in 2022 and 2024. They were really dominant. They've kind of overcome it, and that's why Arkansas has been able to compete at a high level nationally in the regular season. Again, I should clarify. But that's why Arkansas has been able to kind of stay afloat despite this hitting dip, because their pitching has kind of gone up at that same time. So while Nate Thompson has become public enemy number one, Matt Hobbs has become the savior. Whereas I remember back in 2019, it was the exact opposite. People were like, God, this Matt Hobbs guy sucks, but man, this lineup's raking. We love Nate Thompson. And look, I'm not trying to make this about Nate Thompson. I know he's a very polarizing figure here. But look, there has been a dip offensively. 100%. It's like the numbers are there. I didn't include every single season, but in 2023, Arkansas was a lot closer to that 2024 range where I think they were like 97th nationally in slugging in 2023. And you think about some of the guys that they had on that team, like a Jared Wagner, a Jace Borfin, Tavian Josenberger, like that team had no business being 97th slugging, but you didn't get much power out of your shortstop, didn't get much power out of your catcher. Peyton Stovall was banged up, and the rest is history. But I think if you just look at this lineup this year, I think you're going to have a good chance to have a noticeable uptick. And again, I just can't get over the fact that last year was the year that Arkansas did the whole gorilla ball thing. And that was one of the least powerful lineups they've had in the last decade. And so it's just kind of funny. But let's take a look back at this 2024 lineup. Again, I apologize for those that are listening in podcast form because I'm showing a graphic and I'm going to be referencing it here a lot. But you get 8 home runs out of your catcher, Hudson White, which, by the way, 8 home runs is a fair amount for a catcher. Like, you're just not expecting a ton of offense from your catcher. And if you remember, if those y'all remember, Hudson White hit, I would say, like 5 or 6 of those in the last month of the season. He really took off there towards the end. And by the end of the year, he was one of Arkansas's best offensive threats. You get 9 home runs out of your first baseman, Ben McLaughlin. 9's a solid number, but I mean, first base is kind of a power position. And Ben McLaughlin also was one of Arkansas's best hitters overall. He had a nice average and all that. But again, you're not getting a huge amount from your first baseman. Peyton Stovall, I would say 9 home runs is fair for a second baseman. He also missed like the first month of the season with a broken foot. 9 home runs out of your third baseman, you'll live with it, I guess. Your shortstop gives you 14, Vahiva Lloyd. You'll definitely live with that. And that's a number you're going to have him returning, should go up. Now, the outfield was really where things fell apart. I actually, by the way, I just want to go ahead and let you know, I have a typo. Kendall Diggs did not hit 1 home run. He hit 7. So I apologize for that. I'll fire my producer for it, actually. So he hit 7 home runs. Ty Wilmsmeyer did actually hit 1 home run. That is not a typo. And Peyton Holt hit 8, which, by the way, Arkansas had a revolving door in the outfield. This wasn't like a full this wasn't like the everyday, no matter what lineup. It took them a while to actually land on it. And then, of course, you have your DH. Nolan Souza hit 7. Ryder Helfrich hit 3. I put both of them in there because, again, Arkansas didn't really have a consistent 1 through 9, no matter what lineup. So it was a little bit hard to kind of peg it down. But I just wanted to give you guys a look position by position. It's actually kind of insane that Arkansas only had one guy hit double-digit home runs. Now, obviously, you had a lot of guys. You had 3 there with 9. You had a couple more with 8, and Kendall Diggs and Nolan Souza hit 7. So you weren't, if you play for 2 more weeks, you probably have a lineup full of double-digit guys. But again, I definitely think Arkansas is in a position to have a massive uptick in power. So let's just talk about it position by position. I'm going to leave this graphic up so I don't have to look at my face here. Kendall Diggs, we'll start with the outfield. So Kendall Diggs hit 7 home runs. He hit 12 home runs as a sophomore with 63 RBI. So I don't need you guys, you don't need me to explain to you. He's fully capable of having a drastic uptick, definitely an uptick from the one I have listed for him. I can't believe I did that and didn't notice it until we were mid-show. But he had 7 last year. I still think out of your right field spot, whether it's Kendall Diggs or someone else, I think you're in a good position to have a potential double-digit guy there. In center field, you had Ty Wilmsmeyer hit 1. Charles Davalon is who I have projected to start in center field. He hit 10 home runs at Florida Gulf Coast last year, and I was actually really impressed with his power dynamics of what he looked like in the fall. Like, he's a very small guy, but there's a lot of explosion there. I think he's very much a real threat to hit double-digit home runs in the SEC. And then now you could have Rocco Pepe in left field. You could have Logan Maxwell. Rocco Pepe hit 14 home runs last year at Fresno State. So, and now that was a career high for him. That was a massive uptick for him. If he's able to replicate that, cool. But even if he falls back more into like the 7 to 10 range, it's still a number you can live with. Arkansas's outfield this year should have a nice little uptick. It's not a loaded outfield in terms of power. And so the numbers that I'm reading off to you now that are, again, estimates of, let's say Kendall Diggs hits 12, which he hit as a sophomore. Let's say Charles Davalon just replicates what he did last year and he hits 10. And let's say Rocco Pepe hits 10, which again would be less than he hit last year. Now you're moving on to your list. That would have Maxwell there as your DH. Now he's the one guy that I don't think you should be expecting a ton of power from. He does have some power. He had an Oppo home run in the fall, and he hit one more other one. I think he hit 2. But he has 5 career home runs. He hit 3 last year. If I had to guess, I would say he probably ends up in the 5 to 7 range, 5 to 7, 8 range. But again, so those first 4 with your outfield and your DH, some solid power, nothing that's going to blow you away. The reason I think Arkansas is going to have a chance to live with that is because your shortstop, Vahiva Aloy, who hit 14 home runs last year, I think he's a real threat to hit 20, 25, realistically. He hit 14 as a freshman as well. Anybody who's seen Vahiva Aloy play knows that he's got plenty of power. Would it stun you guys at all if he hit 20 home runs this upcoming spring? Not me. He would also, by the way, be the first Razorback since Chad Spanberger to cross the 20 home run threshold. I think he's got a chance to do it. I think Nolan Souza has a chance to do it. He's going to be playing second base for you. I think Brent Iredale, who, by the way, I raved about on yesterday's episode. If you guys missed that, go check that out. Brent Iredale is a very real threat to hit 20. He hit 24 home runs at the JUCO level last year. And I think Ryder Helfrich, as crazy as it sounds, now he's going to be playing catcher every day. I'm sure he's not going to hit 20. But if he hit 10 to 15, certainly wouldn't surprise me. He hit 3 last year, and he only played in a handful of starts. Ryder Helfrich, and by the way, Ryder Helfrich led the Cape Cod League with 11 home runs this past summer. Vahiva also hit, I believe, 8 or 9 home runs, showed off plenty of power, and that's what they would bat. Ryder Helfrich might have more power than anybody on this team if we're just talking raw, just scout grade of power. He's got that big time next level power that's going to translate to the next level with a wood bat. It's going to make him a very coveted prospect this time next year. So don't be surprised if Ryder Helfrich hits 15 home runs. Again, I think Nolan Souza, who, by the way, I'm going to talk about Nolan Souza in a in-depth episode at some point later this week or maybe next week. Nolan Souza is kind of my pick to click, my breakout candidate. He hit 7 home runs last year, and he wasn't even a full-time starter. He took a really nice step forward this offseason. He looked like a different guy in the fall practices. I really like the progress he's made. He's the guy who I think starts at second base. I really think like 10 home runs is a very conservative estimate for Nolan Souza. I think he's going to be more in that 15 to 20 range, if you ask me. I really am a huge fan of his work. And the position I've left out here is first base, who, again, you don't know exactly who's going to start at first base. Could it be Kahio Aloy? Could it be Mike Anderson? Could it be Reese Robinette? Regardless of which one of those three guys emerges, you're talking about next level power threats. Kahio Aloy, by the way, was one of the bright spots of fall. I would say he ended up with 4 home runs, and these were not wall scraping home runs. He had one home run. Can't remember who he hit it against, but it was like 448 feet. He's gone opposite field with some home runs. Kahio Aloy might not end up being as high a draft pick as his brother, but that dude's got some absolute juice in the bat. And again, oppo, pull, like whatever. That dude's got some real power. I believe he hit 9 home runs as a true freshman at BYU while starting and being their DH. So he's got a little bit of a proven power background as well. Mike Anderson, who might not even start at first base, hit 10 home runs as a freshman, hit 13 home runs as a sophomore at Rhode Island. So again, could y'all live with 12 home runs from your first baseman? I think, again, you're looking at a conservative estimate there of, in that 10 to 15 range. Reese Robinette, big country. Don't sleep on that dude. He might end up starting, whether it's first base or DH. He's another guy that has as much raw power as anybody on this team. I've seen him hit home runs off of Hagen Smith. I've seen him hit home runs off of Gabe Gackle. That dude can hit at this level, and he can hit for power, oppo, pull, whatever, big old left-handed bat. So I think Ben McLaughlin, who, by the way, I love Ben McLaughlin. Like, you will not meet a bigger Ben McLaughlin fan than me. I think Arkansas is going to have a hard time replacing his consistency at the plate, how much he got on base. But from a power standpoint, he ended up with 8 or 9 home runs. I think Arkansas is going to have a chance to increase that power. So again, if you just go position by position, a lot of these guys, some of these guys are returning starters like Nolan Souza, Vahiva Aloy, and Ryder Helfrich. I can only assume will hit more home runs as a year older players. Kendall Diggs is another one where clearly, I mean, we've seen him hit more home runs in his past. Would be surprised if he didn't increase on that total as well. I mean, center field, you got 1 home run on a Ty Wilmsmeyer. I think we can improve on that just a little bit. And again, Logan Maxwell's kind of the only guy that I look at and I'm like, he's actually not going to hit a ton of home runs, which again, I'm not going to lie to you guys. He's only going to hit, a handful of home runs here and there. But when you look at all these other positions, Arkansas more than makes up for it. And Brent Iredale, who I've barely even mentioned in this podcast, I said yesterday I think he's the best piece on the entire roster, the most talented hitter Arkansas has. I think he's like he's one of the best kept secrets in college baseball. I have absolutely, I would bet my life he hits at least 10 to 12 home runs. And again, I really do think it's going to end up being more in that 15 to 20 range. I haven't been keeping a running tally as I've been rattling off all these estimates, but 87 feels like an easy bar for this Arkansas team to climb. And again, I hope that you guys I hope I articulated it well enough to where you agree with me that Arkansas needs a little bit of an uptick in power, despite the fact that they also need a little bit of an uptick in some other aspects of just getting on base, drawing some walks, doing all those normal things, moving runners over, getting runners in, situational hitting. All that needs to be good. But I do think Arkansas is going to have a chance to have a much, 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 much more powerful lineup than they had last year. And really, even if you think back to the 2023 team, which again I said was like 97th in slugging, their outfield that year had a ton of power with Borfin, Wagner, and Josenberger. But I mean, your shortstop didn't hit a single home run. Parker Rowland, maybe he hit 1 or 2, something like that. Peyton Stovall, I believe, only hit like 5 or 6 while he was banged up playing second base. So again, it's not like there's been some obvious holes in the lineup the last few years. And I don't think Arkansas really has those holes, even though I'm admitting that Logan Maxwell is not like a high power guy. And hell, I'll even throw Rocco Pepe, who hit 14 home runs last year. But that was a little bit of an outlier if you look at his career numbers. Even if both of those guys end up being in like the 5 to 8 home run range, I just look around that infield. I think Arkansas's infield is going to be as powerful as any in the country. I mean, your second baseman and your shortstop are both very real candidates to hit 20 home runs, if you ask me. And that's Nolan Souza and Vahiva Aloy. Your catcher is also a top power guy in Ryder Helfrich. So again, call me crazy. I think Arkansas is going to have a chance to hit more than 100 home runs. And if you look around at the country at some of these other guys, they're going to need to have a massive uptick in home runs. But I do think Arkansas is a little bit more equipped to compete in the supposed arms race that it's been in college baseball the last few years. Which, by the way, I want to pull these numbers up again real quick, just because if you'll notice, in 2019, Arkansas was 16th nationally with 1.33 home runs per game, and Arkansas hit 1.45 home runs per game last year, which is more, but they were 69th nationally, which again just kind of tells you how college baseball is trending, the direction things are going. More and more people are hitting more and more home runs. And Arkansas, I feel like, got left behind in that a little bit. And Arkansas kind of stagnated as a program offensively. I think Arkansas has the pieces in place to improve on this. Now, I know there's going to be a lot of comments that a lot of people that are like, yeah, but I mean, wait till Nate Thompson gets his hand on Brent Iredale and all that, which, like, I hear you. But if you look back at Nate Thompson's resume, the one thing he's been actually pretty consistent in is developing power. I mean, Tavian Josenberger had like 3 home runs in his career prior to coming to Arkansas. Jalen Battles was a talented kid, a nice prospect as a defender. He hit 7 home runs as a sophomore at Arkansas, jumps that up to 10 to 12 as a junior. Braden Webb went from like 4 home runs as a junior to double digit as a senior. Caden Wallace. I mean, all these guys, Arkansas's had a lot of guys over the years who have increased their power output. Hell, Robert Moore that one year jumped up to like 16, 17 home runs. Like, Arkansas has been pretty consistent at getting some power out of most of their guys, even if their batting averages may dip or other things may dip, which, by the way, a lot of it times is just because you're facing SEC competition. But again, that was a very long-winded way of answering the question. Once again, shout out to Lane for lobbing me up for this one, because I've been kind of wanting to talk about it for a while. That's now 2 days in a row where I'm like, yeah, I'm going to have these shorter episodes, but here I am. We're approaching the 30-minute mark, so a little bit long-winded, but I hope I sufficiently answered the question and didn't say anything too stupid. Appreciate you guys once again for tapping in. We will be back tomorrow. I have not decided yet which question I will pull from. We will decide that later, but again, this is your third Baumbastic podcast of the week. It's really good to be back in the saddle. Now I feel like we're getting back to a routine a little bit, and now you guys can count on this. Every weekday there's going to be a Baumbastic. I think we've got plenty of ammo to last us through the holidays and up into January, when we will actually have real scrimmages to talk about, real reactions to talk about, and that's going to be awesome. Man, I just cannot wait for baseball season. As I was recording this, I just got more and more excited to see some of these cats come out here and play. And yeah, so I appreciate you guys for tapping in. It's been a beautiful Wednesday episode of the Baumbastic Podcast. I will see you guys tomorrow. Thank you. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you can. Inside Arkansas to the moon.